Welcome back to Hidden Struggles. In part one, we talked about shunning, how it tears families apart and forces us to move forward without the people we once leaned on. In part two, we're shifting gears. Today, we're diving into what comes next, building new friendships, finding safe circles, and creating community after leaving Jehovah's Witnesses.
You were out for 10 years before you started doing videos.
Yeah.
So you gave yourself time to heal.
Yeah.
But at the time that you left the religion, when you and Mike stopped going to the Kingdom Hall 10 years prior to you coming out on the YouTube, did you know this wasn't the truth at that time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
See?
Yeah.
You did give yourself, so you guys gave yourself time before you did your first video.
Yeah, we did. And we were just busy. Like, I was going to college and I was having to build a new social network. It was the same year that I stopped going to meetings. I started in college full time. And, I felt, those were really dark times because I didn't have a social network. And I remember clearly sitting in my bathroom on a Thursday night when, we would normally have a meeting that night, almost talking myself out of getting ready to go to the meeting because I was just like, I'm so lonely. I miss my structure. I miss my friends. I don't know what to do with myself. And I would sit in my bathroom just crying, like, maybe I should just go. Maybe I should just go, even though I know it's not the truth, and I had that struggle for many, many, many months. But eventually it got easier. And because I was like, no, I can't go and be fake and pretend I believe in something I don't believe in. And, if they're never going to accept me for who I actually am, I can never be who I am. And by the way, I don't even know who I am yet. Like, I got to figure out who I even am. I don't know who I am without the cult indoctrination.
I'm with you 100% on that one. So and this is why it's so important to have these conversations, because like you said, you didn't know who you were. You didn't have a support group when you like basically with your family when you left. So now, how long did it take you to feel like, hey, look, I'm finally finding some friends?
When I left, I didn't have any friends. I had a couple of non-Jehovah's Witness friends who I had known prior. And, I said, by the way, I am not a witness anymore. And they stepped right up and were, very, good friends to me during that time. But I had to make friends. I had to find new friendships. And that took time. And, it just, life moves on. And you just have to put yourself out there to get to know people and maybe try different things. Like I joined some meetups of some of my interests, and meetup actually was how I found improv several years after that. But it took time, and it's not going to happen overnight. And just like with my nephew, when he woke up in 2019. And it was really tough. And, he reaches out to me and he's like, Aunt Robin, I think I need to talk to you. And I was like, it's not going to always feel like this. Right now, it feels sort of like the end of the world. And you don't know who you are. You don't know what your life is going to look like without the structure of this religion controlling everything about your life. But eventually, it'll start hurting less and less, and you'll start meeting new people and making new friendships and finding new interests. And you just have to give it time. That's the one thing. It just takes time.
You said a lot there, and I feel like that's the reason why a lot of people don't want to leave, is because they are afraid that they're not going to have anyone to connect with. And I feel like when you go to the Kingdom Hall, they just this is where you go, this is where you are, and these are your instant friends.
Mhm.
Even though you're at the Kingdom Hall and you're not connecting with most of the people there, because I know I didn't have the same interest with people. I had to go there and fake it that I wanted to be, at the Kingdom Hall and be friends with these people because we didn't have the same thing in common. We were just in a group of people that said we had to hang around each other because we were Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
So you actually spent 10 years trying to find friends.
Mhm.
That's what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, because I made a couple of friends in college, and then I was just in college trying to graduate, and then once I graduated, and then trying to find a job, I'm just living life. I'm just living
Okay.
life, and me and Mike are doing our thing, and I have a few friends, during that time, and you just. I'm trying to put myself back in that time, because I know it was difficult. I know it was difficult initially trying to make some friends. And like I said, I had a couple of friends that were not Jehovah's Witnesses that I knew from before, and they stepped up, and then I'm explaining to them, by the way, like, I couldn't really hang out with you that much, and you were more of an acquaintance to me, but I always loved you, and let me tell you how Jehovah's Witnesses really think. And it helped a lot of them to really understand the witnesses better. I was just, like I said, I was going to school, so I was very busy. I kept myself very, very busy for several years and trying to make friends during that time. But you can't force friendships, they have to happen naturally. And, sometimes people, not everybody's a good person, so it takes time to make real friendships.
And I think that the sheer number of friends that we had or supposedly had when we were Jehovah's Witnesses, we probably only had a few friends at the Kingdom Hall, the same way you had just a few friends when you left.
Yeah.
Because they're not really who they say they are either. And I also feel like because you were going to college, that took up a lot of your time, and
Mhm.
you wouldn't be able to really nurture a friendship anyway.
Yeah.
So the way things went, it probably wasn't so much that you were lonely, but that you just realized that you had a Rolodex of 100 Jehovah's Witnesses in your contact list
Mm.
that you couldn't contact. That's probably what you were looking at it as.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And because you had the structure built in of the meetings, and that was sort of part of your social life too, because you would talk to people before and after the meetings, and maybe you would go out for something to eat after the meetings, and it felt like you had a large social network. But in all actuality, those friendships were not real friendships. They were just based on you both being witnesses and having to do this thing. Having to go to the meetings.
I think so, because it was conditional.
Yeah.
So every Jehovah's Witness knew that if they didn't agree with everything that the Watchtower was saying and speaking and preaching,
Yeah.
then they could be on the sidelines. And so you really couldn't speak your mind. You really couldn't be who you wanted to be. And that's why I know it really has to be hard for people that are PMO.
And that was me for the last year that I went to the meetings. I was a PMO, for sure, a PMO.
I mean, so now tell us a little bit about how things are going with your improv. What does that look like? You've graduated from college, you're working a job. You want to talk about how everything transpired and fell into place once all that stuff started working for you?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was already starting improv comedy when we started making videos. So I just really threw myself into it because I just fell in love with the art form. And so I still, now 9 years later, I'm still doing improv comedy. I'm in several improv troupes, and just had a show Friday night, as a matter of fact. And if anybody's interested, I have a channel called Robin Freebird, and I put some of those performances up there. But it's mainly for my team to watch how we did, so that we can analyze ourselves. That doesn't have a lot of subscribers on that channel, but that's fine. It's not the point. But it's comedy has been very important to my healing, to my journey. And I always tell everybody they should check out improv comedy. And, maybe it's not for everybody, but even doing a drop-in class can be a lot of fun for someone who doesn't want to get on stage and perform in front of people. But just doing a class sometimes can be very freeing, where you can become a different character. And I know I was working out a lot of things that were going on in my real life, and still do, through improv comedy. So I find it as, in fact, one of my teams is called improv therapy. So it is a little bit like therapy.
I think that's great because I did a 5 minutes to funny. I took a class.
Yeah, I remember you said that.
Yeah, and we went, and I think my class was 5 to 6 weeks, and then we had to do a stand-up graduation, and I did stand-up at the Improv in Washington, D.C. I had 23 friends that actually showed up that night. So you never know when you're making an impression on people. And I think, I'm just going to throw this out here. Sometimes you have to be the person to step out to invite people when you're trying to make friends. And one of the things that I discovered later on from a girl from my job, she told me that people thought that I already had my own network of friends, right? So they were too afraid to reach out to me to invite me out because they thought that I was already connected, right?
Okay.
So I'm just saying to people listening to this broadcast that you just never know that there could be people that want to connect with you, but they may think that you're already connected with somebody else, some other group, and they're too afraid to reach out. And you would be surprised the number of people that would be like, yeah, I would love to go out. You know,
it's so true, especially like when you're older. Like I'm in my 50s now, and I've talked to some girls, some women that I'm making friendships with, that I just invite them to go on a walk. I'm like, hey, you want to meet? Like we've seen each other in social settings, and like we connect and we laugh and everything. And I'm like, I would like you to be my friend, and you want to meet me for a walk? And so I've been doing that a lot lately, because I'm like, especially as we get older, it's harder to make friends because everybody is, your life gets way more complicated as you're older, and you're also more settled into your life and your routine, that to break out of your routine takes real effort, and to invite new people into your life. And yeah, so that's what I've been doing, because I'm still trying to make friends. I feel like we always need to be trying to make new friends.
I agree, but you would not believe the number of people that are looking for friends, and you just got to go where the people are.
Yeah, that's true.
And
you think it's hard for you, to make friends, but it's also just as hard for other people. So, having that understanding and not and realizing that just because someone hasn't invited you to do something doesn't mean they don't want to. They may be afraid. They may be afraid of rejection as well, or they may think that you wouldn't be interested in hanging out with them, or there's any number of things. So we just have to put ourselves out there.
So when you joined the improv, when you saw it on the internet, was that your interest before you went there, before you joined it?
So I've always been sort of a performer. That's my personality. And, I did some drama classes in high school and whatnot. But when I was on Meetup, and it asks you for, your interests, things that you're interested in. And I think I had put like maybe acting, maybe getting back into acting. And so it suggested an improv drop-in class. And I was just like, I didn't really know exactly what that would entail, but I was like, it sounds fun. And it took me a whole year to actually go to a drop-in class. I had joined it on Meetup, but it took me a year to actually show up.
Right.
And from my first class, I was like, oh, this is like being a kid again, and playing and makeup. You're making it up at the end of the moment. And I was like, it felt like being a little kid again. And I said, I want to do this forever. This is so much fun.
Wow, that's amazing.
One of my really good friends, and I ended up being in a couple of troops with her. She's moved away now, but we're still very good friends. And she had just moved to Florida, and she was looking to make friends, and that's why she came into an improv drop-in. That's why she started. And I think it's a great way, and now to sort of the natural evolution, especially after the pandemic, when people were so isolated in their homes. And if you didn't have a network of friends, that must have been really tough for people, to be really isolated, truly isolated, and not have friends. So I think that's a good thing.
I think that when people are trying to connect with people, the top two or three or four places would be a church, work, when you're going to school through 12th grade or college. Work can be one of the better places, but like you said, you're looking for somebody that has your interests. Don't just I don't recommend anybody to just hang out with a group of people just because they're people that you can hang out with, because after I left Watchtower, I wasn't trying to be a poster child.
Yeah.
Or to get in trouble, and now they can look back and say, see what happens when you leave Jehovah or leave the organization. Look at what happened to them,
Right.
So you want to make sure that you still maintain the person that you are,
Yeah.
I mean, so how about Mike? Did he have any issues with finding friends?
Mike's always been a bit of a loner. He doesn't have a big friend group, but he plays paintball still competitively.
So he's still doing that?
Yes, he is.
Well, good.
Yeah.
But do you think that guys, let's just talk about that for a minute. Do you think that guys need to have a lot of friends? How do you think, how do you feel about that?
I mean, I don't know about men are so different than women, and their friendships are so different than women friendships.
I think men can survive because they don't need that connection like we do. I think they are more, they can take it or leave it, even when they were I think even when JT was in the organization, it's like he knew, he's comfortable in his skin, and he doesn't need people to validate him,
Right.
But I think that because we are more chatty as women, we want somebody to talk to. I do believe that one of the things that I will say in hindsight of leaving is I probably wouldn't be as talkative to people, because just because you meet people, sometimes you trust too much, so I would definitely say when you meet people, don't tell them too much of your business, especially the Jehovah's Witness stuff. We didn't do that when we first left anyway. We didn't tell people that we were Jehovah's Witnesses because we wanted to have the experience of coming into a group or coming to a get together, going to a get together as JT and Lady C, not JT and Lady C, the former Jehovah's Witnesses. So we didn't do that. I would say be careful what you say when you're making friends too.
I find that when we are unhealed, we have this injury of being raised in a cult, and we're working on our healing, but we're still going to attract people to us who sometimes feel very comfortable for a reason. It's because maybe they remind us of the people that we were around when we were witnesses. And I certainly did that. I attracted some toxic people into my life. But then I learned, I was like, oh, you can't, just because they're not a witness doesn't mean that they're trustworthy. And it showed me what I was attracting to myself, and that I didn't have higher standards for what I expect from people in my life. And then I learned to start commanding more respect from the people who I was surrounding myself with. And it helped, it was a hard lesson, but I actually began loving myself more. and expecting more from people.
Yeah. I mean, you're right, because a lot of times, you have that, I'm not gonna really say I was passive, because I kind of, like I had that confidence. I still had confidence and stuff like that. But I think because I was that kind of person that's more expressive, you
Mm-hmm.
know, and I'm not really afraid to put myself out to say certain things.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're thinking that this person understands because they too are putting themselves out saying certain things. So
Mm-hmm.
you think that, oh, they're saying and they're sharing. Oh, I'm going to say and share too.
Mm-hmm.
But you have to remember that when you share something with somebody, they may share your information with somebody else without the context.
Mm.
That's the issue I think that you find yourself in.
Yeah.
So when you got to be a little bit more guarded, because that happened in the organization too,
Mm-hmm.
where people will make it sound worse than what it is because they like to make it sound juicy. That's
Yeah.
all I'm saying.
I think no, no matter who we are, whether we came out of a cult or not, depending on your personality, I think we tended to be a little more naive and trusting of people because we were taught to trust our brothers, and that they were our family and
Mhm.
but maturity, and growing up, you start to realize that no, not everybody is out for your highest good and that you need to be discerning and before you trust people entirely. I'm very much like you were describing. I'm an open book. I still am, because I'm like, this is me. And I am very forthright and tell people pretty quickly when they get to know me that I was raised in a cult. And and then they get very curious. Oh my God, what was that like? And then, because I always want every opportunity to inform people about what Jehovah's Witnesses really are. Because I'm like, most people have either they work with a Jehovah's Witness or they have a family member who's a Jehovah's Witness. So everybody knows someone who's a witness. So I find it as this is my opportunity to educate people. So I let them know. And I understand why you wanted to join certain social groups just as JT and Lady C. But for me, I feel like this is my work.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna tell you what we did. The guy I tell you about that I used to work with years ago, he knew that I was a former Jehovah's Witness. So we were very selective in who we told that to.
Mm.
JT had other people on his job. They knew he was a former Jehovah's Witness. We didn't want to be in our neighborhood, coming home and being around our neighbors at our neighborhood events as former Jehovah's Witnesses. But somehow we got into a conversation with my neighbor, and we did talk about our activism, and we began to start talking to the other people as well, some of them, because everywhere me and JT was going at the time, people were recognizing us at the store.
Getting back to improv, a wonderful improviser I know that I get to see her perform once a year at a festival that I'm getting ready to go to. But she does a show called the Friendship Show, and it's just her. And then she'll eventually invite someone from the audience to come up and do a scene with her. But she always talks about, she goes, I have, and she'll look at her phone, I have 10,000 Facebook friends. She goes, but I don't really know any of them. And she's like, what is friendship? And like, she does this whole, and it's like, yeah, it's so true. Everybody the more connected it seems we are through technology, the less connected we are. And it's so important to have that human interaction. And it's funny, as much as I gripe about maybe my job and I'm like, oh, I have to drive, I have a long commute, back and forth. But I'm like, I am so grateful that I work with these women that I love. And I'm like, I think that this is actually really good for me mentally to be around all of these women that I work with. So, I'm actually like, I don't want to leave my job.
That's perfect. But I just, can't stress it enough to actually just reach out, because I'm going to tell you a really quick story. There was a lady who worked at my job, and it was during COVID. And I realized, I said, well, you know what? She may not know anybody. And I'm going to reach out to her and invite her to work on this project with me. And we eventually exchanged telephone numbers, and she and I became good friends. And we've gone out to lunch several times. And it just so happened when I called her, she goes, you know, my last day is XYZ. I forgot it was on a Friday or whatever. And I was like, oh my God, I'm glad I made a connection with her before she left. So that reaching out to people, you just never know, you know?
Yeah. And not everybody's going to be your friend. Not everybody's going to be worthy to be your friend. That's an important lesson to learn, is if a person is worthy. And, you know, like we were talking about being raised witnesses. I don't believe in holding grudges, but we weren't allowed to, like, everybody, we had to love everybody, and we had to accept everybody. And, you know, in the real world, no, you don't. No, you don't. And, you know, not that you're going to go around hating people, but you that's one of the lessons I had to learn, of not making excuses for people's bad behaviors, that if they've shown me who they are, I can let them go in peace. And I hold no ill will towards you, but you are not allowed to be a part of my life anymore.
That's right. That's right. But I mean, there's a lot of things and I know people said that they volunteered to do things. Like you said, you did meetups. Both of us did comedy. You're still doing it. I joined Toastmasters, meeting people at work, you know, just all kind of ways. And then I had a book club. I had 2 different book clubs online that I did. I did one book club online, and I did one book club in person. This is pre-COVID. And I had men, because JT was part of my book club, that we used to take the couples. We had couples that went, so the guys was there too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I joined other groups. I found friendships through a group of people that go to Dr. Joe Dispenza events. And so I went to a few of those, and I'm still friends with those people. And, you know, so you will find your people. It's like, if that's holding anybody back from leaving, I understand. It's a very powerful attractor to stay in the religion because of fear of losing your friendships. But like you said, when they're conditional friendships, and you will find out who are your real friends when you leave. And like, none of those people who were witnesses or still are witnesses, none of those people will even return a text message from me. So, you know, and I tried reaching out to some of my friends, and you know, they weren't going to have any part of me now that I made my choice. So, but I've made other friendships, and like you said, there's seasons for friendships. And just because you make a friend right away after you leave the organization doesn't mean they're going to be your friend even a year from now. You know, they might be there to teach you something, you know, about yourself, and just keep, you know. But I believe in staying open, keeping an open heart, but being discerning. And you know, you eventually will find your people if you're putting yourself out there.
Right. You will find your tribe.
You will find your tribe. Yeah.
Right. And just always keep in mind that never, ever allow a group of people to keep you from being who you are and who you're trying to be and become, because it's not about, you know, being at the Kingdom Hall or any other place that you don't want to be, you know?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And, you know, listen, you find out there are cults everywhere. We say improv is a cult. We do. We say that. But
it is. Do you know that like sporting events, people who have a sporting a team that they root for, being from a specific school, being from a specific state, country, you know, all of those are like tribe-like. And then it kind of like just goes into these different subsets, once you get there.
Mm-hmm.
Like people who are part of a sorority in a college,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's just so much tribalism.
Yeah.
And, so that's what happens. But that's how you find friends too. But it's not. But the ultimate is when somebody says this is for God. See, that's the problem. Because if I say I'm a Cowboys fan and now I'm with the Lions, the Detroit Lions, I don't really think that people who vote for the Dallas Cowboys is not going to start treating me bad because I'm rooting for the Detroit Lions, unless they're really, really, really into that.
I don't know. My aunt, my 92-year-old aunt has been a Kentucky Wildcat fan and has had season tickets for over 60 years. And she pretty much hated anybody from Tennessee or Louisville.
What? Oh my gosh.
She is softened in her old age, but boy, she was like anybody from Tennessee was no good with her.
But then those are the extremes, though.
Yeah.
Those are, because I remember we went to so many Super Bowl parties, as EXJWs, and they had people from all different teams that were at these parties, and nobody was at each other's throat just because they were going for one team or the other. In fact, it was a kind of fun thing sometimes when people were like, oh, your team didn't score, or my team was doing better than your team. You had that kind of thing going on, but you didn't have somebody saying you're going to be shunning you for the rest of the night because you're not voting for my team. You're not rooting for my team.
Yeah.
That was just kind of crazy. But I think this is a great discussion that a lot of people just need to hear, because once you start, just getting a group of people together and just kind of hanging out, and I think the Jehovah's Witness community has been phenomenal for a lot of people waking up.
Okay.
So, Robin, I want to thank you so much for being on the program. But before we end, do you have any other final comments that you would like our listening audience to hear?
Well, I don't know if I have. I think we've covered a lot of stuff here and a lot of very interesting topic, especially when it comes to making friends. But I just will share that I besides the improv, I have another YouTube channel called Adventures with Robin, and I went from the making What's Up Watchtower videos and exposing a cult to trying to do something fun, and that's just for me. And so I review beauty and fashion on that channel. So anybody want to come over there and be friends with me over there, that would be great. But other than that, yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation, and thank you so much for having me on.
You are so welcome, and thank you so much for being here. And again, that is Adventures with Robin. Mm-hmm. She also has a What's Up Watchtower channel with her husband, Mike, and she has an improv channel that she has online. So she's got 3 different channels, and I'm going to leave the links to those channels in the description. Please, we would love to hear your feedback about our discussion and making friends. If you have other ways that you made friends after leaving, we would love to hear your comments. Thank you so much, and I'll see you all on the next episode.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Hidden Struggles with your host, Lady C. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to stay connected with us.